North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reiterated a call for the United States to withdraw its hostile policies against the regime while underlining the implementation of interKorean agreements. Kim made these remarks during the ruling Workers' Party Congress, one of the regime's biggest political events. Since it began last Tuesday, the party has announced, among various details, a revision to its party rules to strengthen national defense, Kim's election to General Secretary of the party, and a new nuclear-powered submarine said to be nearing completion. To delve into these developments, we have joining us on the line now two guests who have been closely following the Congress. First, we have reporter Andrew Jung, who covers North Korea for the Wall Street Journal from Seoul. Hello, Mr. Jung. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We also have on the line Chad O'Carroll, CEO of Korea Risk Group, which produces leading North Korea-related publications NK News and NK Pro. Welcome back on the show, Mr. O'Carroll.
Hi there, good evening.
So, Mr. Jung, let me start with you. Can you first start us off by introducing us to the North Korean Workers' Party Congress? Why was it important and what has come out from there so far?
There were a lot of lengthy statements, but to, I guess, just quickly summarize, one of the more recent ones announced this morning here in Korea was Kim Yo-jong's apparent demotion. Kim Yo-jong is, of course, leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister. She was not mentioned in the members of Politburo within North Korea. Kim Jong-un was, of course, meanwhile promoted to a new title, General Secretary. North Korea also earlier revealed its higher nuclear ambitions. It plans to develop supersonic delivery vehicles for its nuclear warheads, nuclear submarines, military satellites. And the country also touched on its future five-year plan on the economy, which includes plans to build I guess a total of 75,000 homes in the capital and an area in its northeastern regions, also secure 8 million tons of cement. So these were some of the specifics that were revealed in their economic plans during the Congress.
Now, Mr. O'Carroll, not only has there been this Congress, but this morning, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said that intelligence authorities have detected signs of North Korea staging a military parade late Sunday at the Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang. What do we know so far about this?
Well, actually, we, about late last night at 11 p.m. Seoul time, we actually broke news of this. We had sources in Pyongyang telling us about this. And basically, all we know so far is that there were, from our sources, 10 or 11 heavy armored vehicles spotted en route to Kim Il-sung Square. We also heard from our source that there were large numbers of troops heading there, that the road was closed, and that there were also sounds of either mortar fire or fireworks at around 1 a.m. Seoul time this morning. It's quite unusual to have two military parades back to back. There was only one just 3 months ago in October, obviously. So we're still not entirely sure what this was. There's been some rumor that Kim Jong-un might be doing an inspection of troops and potentially a more modest selection of mechanized armor and artillery and tanks and so on. But we're waiting on tenterhooks for information on that. There may be in the next hour or so details on North Korean state TV about what that was all about. Otherwise, it's possible we'll learn early tomorrow morning.
Okay, some question marks remaining then. Mr. O'Carroll, what should we make of all the developments that have come out from Pyongyang over the last week, including the Congress and this possible military parade? What are the implications of these announcements towards South Korea and the US, of course?
Well, I think going back to last August when this Congress was revealed, it was framed in the context of the economy being in a pretty bad state and the five-year economic plan from the last Congress of May 2016 having been completely underdelivered by the government. So we went into this Congress expecting the economy to be the prime focus of attention. But what's been surprising is while there is a new five-year economic plan and Details are quite sparse on that. The key issues, some of the key issues are really related to military development and also North Korea's foreign relations. We were really not expecting that so much. The key significance of all of this stuff, Andrew's walked us through in terms of what's on the menu of the future years ahead, is that it seems that North Korea is really just doubling down on the sort of military-first policies of yesteryear. And while ostensibly there is a new economic plan, we've seen nothing in that plan to suggest that anything can really improve North Korea's decaying economic situation. There's no signs of reforms, goals to secure sanctions relief, or hopes to re-engage with the wider world. It's just more self-independence and rhetoric we've heard dozens of times in the past. So quite a pessimistic outlook. And I think for the US, the big problem is that this leaves them with very little opening in terms of where they might be able to engage. And for South Korea too, unless it cancels military drills with the United States and abandons some of its modernization efforts, then it's very unlikely North Korea is going to be willing to talk to President Moon.
Mr. Jung, would you also agree that there was a surprise about how much focus there was on military development and the messages it seems to be sending to the international stage?
I would also, I guess, add to what Chad just said, that, I mean, these party congresses are supposed to be more of these grand, macro, and largely diplomatic statements. If you look at the previous ones, going back to maybe 1980 and even further down history. But so to that extent, I think it was a bit unexpected that North Korea would come out and list these specifics that they might do with their nuclear weapons program. So and although these are mere words at this point, it does send some sort of a hostile message towards both Washington and Seoul and to a broader extent Tokyo and other U.S. allies. So again, on that point, it was a bit surprising. But I think Chad also kind of noted this, but we also can see hints that the North Koreans aren't quite, shutting the door completely to diplomacy, even though, again, as Chad points out, the conditions that they lay out are really, tough for both Washington and Seoul to play with. But we've also been seeing signs that the North Koreans are discreetly reaching out to see whatever the new administration in Washington can and is willing to offer them. We've had people talk about the North Koreans reaching out to the Europeans, South Korea's National Intelligence Agency, I think late last year, saying that the North Koreans weren't seeking to, I guess, provoke the incoming administration, at least so far in the near future. So I guess we have to weigh these kind of, thinly veiled threats from the North Koreans with also the fact that they haven't closed the diplomatic door completely. And they're kind of, trying to pressure both Washington and Seoul to come up with better conditions because they're saying otherwise, we can come up with hypersonic, missiles, multi-warhead nuclear tipped missiles, nuclear submarines, military satellites. So if somehow they're able to really do that, they would be, there would be significant implications to the military balance of power, though there's a lot of skepticism on whether the North Koreans can really do that in the short term.
Before we discuss further implications and possibly the U.S. reaction, Mr. O'Carroll, I believe you wanted to also touch upon something Mr. Jung said earlier about the Party Congress electing Kim Jong-un as General Secretary of the Workers' Party. This was a title previously held by Kim's father and grandfather. And also over the speculation that Kim's sister, Kim Ye-jung, there was speculation that she would be promoted to a higher position, but that seemed to be proved wrong, and she was excluded from the list of alternate party members of the party's political bureau. What do you make of Kim Jong-un's new title and Kim Ye-jung's lack of title, should we say?
So I'm not one of these kind of Kremlinologist-type leadership experts. For me, Kim Jong-un has been leader since December 2011 and nothing has changed. These are all just adornments as far as I'm concerned, personally speaking. I'm sure there is some significance, but you'd need to get someone who really studies these leadership things closely to explain why it matters. I personally don't think it does. With Kim Yo-jong, that is more interesting. And agreed, there was expectation that she could be seeing more of a prominent role. It should be said she was sitting throughout the Congress on the rostrum, so she's definitely not, she's still an important part of the government, but it seems that there's no clarity surrounding her position. The absence of clarity doesn't necessarily mean she's been downgraded. There may be a title that they're not showing on or revealing on state media that could be more senior, but in general, I think the developments relating to new titles for Kim Jong-un are not that important in the big scale of things.
Okay, now, Mr. Jung, how do you think the incoming Biden administration is viewing these announcements from Pyongyang? How do you think they are reacting and preparing for dealing with North Korea?
Well, I'm sure that someone in the State Department is looking at this very closely, but with the Biden Transition Committee and Washington at large, I think they're preoccupied with other things going on over there on the other side of the world. So, to be honest, I don't think North Korea is weighing heavily on President-elect Biden's mind at this moment. But once and when he gets the moment to really look into this, I think the Biden administration will certainly look at North Korea's, I don't know if we can call it a threat or a pledge to develop these new weapon systems for their nuclear weapons program. They will look at it as both a threat and also a way for Pyongyang to try to gain leverage in any future negotiations. But at the same time, we also know that the incoming Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, has pledged to, beef up working level talks in contrast to what the Trump administration did. So in the larger picture, I don't think that the Biden administration's strategy or approach to North Korea will be heavily, tweaked or changed because of what was said during Congress.
Mr. O'Carroll, North Korea seems to be ratcheting up its rhetoric, talking up its nuclear capabilities and nuclear program. Do you expect any sort of provocations or heightened tension on the Korean Peninsula as Biden takes office and a new administration takes over in Washington?
I think the key issue relating to this is going to be the forthcoming possibility of spring drills in South Korea involving the United States. Yes, if that goes ahead, even in a moderated form, quote unquote, I think there's a high probability that North Korea will feel compelled to respond with some kind of exercise. If you just rewind a year back to spring 2020, we saw lots of artillery drills in North Korea, short-range tactical solid fuel ballistic missile launches, Air Force drills, you name it. So that's one likely trigger. But just touching on what Andrew was saying, I think, it seems to me that North Korea is really trying to compel the United States to accept its trajectory and realize that talk about sanctions relief, food aid and concessions that might have worked in the decades before simply won't cut the mustard now. And I think what the Biden administration would need to do if it wants to try and turn this around is appoint a very, very senior point person on North Korea and get the ball rolling with a conversation immediately. I think the longer they delay with that, the lower the prospect of any kind of positive diplomatic outcome in the short to the medium term. And sadly, that possibility is already quite small, even at the best of situations.
If we bring in the South Korean role in this now, regarding South Korea during the Party Congress, Kim Jong-un expressed discontent over Seoul's military armament and demanded that the South faithfully implement cross-border agreements. Kim, however, did leave room for improvement, saying that relations could return to 3 years ago to a starting point of peace and prosperity at any time, but added that it all depends on South Korea's attitude. President Moon, meanwhile, also said during his news address today that his administration is still ready to meet with North Korea anytime, anywhere, even in a non-face-to-face format. Mr. Jung, how do you think inter-Korean relations will go from here?
Well, I think what President Moon Jae-in said this morning here in Korea was kind of like a de facto agreeing to disagree with what the North Koreans said over the weekend and last week. Because the North Koreans specifically, outlined that they're not interested in what the South Koreans have been proposing in terms of economic and pandemic cooperation. But the fact that President Moon mentioned a virtual meeting of sorts as a possible idea, I think that reflects the South Koreans' understanding that the North Koreans are still very much concerned about any unwanted and inadvertent importation of the coronavirus. So they're kind of, I guess they're pulling all the strings that's possible to sit down with the North Koreans to start. But the North Koreans are obviously really, really concerned about coronavirus, so they're not going to be willing to suddenly sit down and meet face to face. And I think the North Koreans are very well aware that what the conditions that they've outlined to the South are big asks, even to a very inter-Korean engagement pro or supporter of that kind of policy in President Moon Jae-in. So the North Koreans, I think, are trying to see how far they can go with the current South Korean administration. But at the same time, they do realize that what they put out there on the table are huge asks for the South Korean side, which will face inevitably both domestic political opposition and, of course, pushback from the U.S. If they, try to really accept and go ahead with the North Koreans outlined.
And Mr. O'Carroll, same question to you. What do you think are the prospects for inter-Korean engagements this year, especially after everything that's come out of Pyongyang over the last week?
I think there is still potential there. North Korea, if it's to go ahead with any of these projects like Kumgang tourism, with Wonsan Kalma, which it hasn't mentioned once in this Congress, it's going to need South Korean tourists to fill those hotels realistically. I can't imagine Chinese flocking all the way to the East Coast after having to go to Pyongyang by land or a flight first. The logistics don't really support that. Yeah, maybe I still think there's potential, but as Andrew said, President Moon has a very tough case to make now. He's going to be a lame duck president himself fairly soon. It's tough to see where interest will emerge. And while we're talking about virtual talks, we shouldn't forget that the North Koreans, of course, severed the so-called hotline between President Moon and Kim Jong-un, which sources told us was never even used. So the prospects for even virtual contact, if they've cut that line, who knows? One positive, I would say, which is interesting, is that just a few days ago, North Korea published a kind of memorial book about 2020, and it sort of flagged all of the country's achievements and so on. And one of the things we noticed was they deleted everything about the about inter-Korean policy. So there was no mention of the North Korean rallies last June against President Moon in South Korea for the leaflets and so on. And they also didn't have any publicity about the destruction of the liaison office. So, in desperate times as they are, I think that's probably one small good sign that they didn't want to draw attention to that.
In the meantime, the Congress is expected to come to an end soon. Wait to hear any more news coming from Pyongyang, especially of that military parade as well. We will leave it there. In the meantime, though, we've been speaking to Andrew Jung from the Wall Street Journal and Chad O'Carroll from the Korea Risk Group. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.